Well, hello, it's Game Methuselah. I hope everything's going well for everybody. I wanted to do a quick video for you today and talk to you about both the game convention I went to a couple weeks ago that I mentioned in my last video, and about the general state of gaming that I sort of gleaned from going there. And a lot of this has been running through my mind for a while, but I wanted to talk to you about it and give you guys a challenge to see if maybe you can help me out. And in so helping the hobby out, because that's really my interest here all the time when I talk to people, is to try to sort of pass on what I've seen over the years, and maybe some small amount of it can be of benefit to you on growing your own games. Now, the convention was fun. I had a good time. And sort of one of the main factors that's going to be in this is the turnout was really poor. Now, I don't think that was to have anything to do with the convention itself. I think it was very professionally run. There were a number of people there, but the turnout was much smaller than I had hoped to see. I thought we would see more people out there actually gaming. And it's a big space, and I think even though there were quite a few people there, spread out over a large area of a convention that used to have more than maybe 2 or 3 times the amount of people that it came, it looked really, really small. There was a pretty good turnout in the role-playing section, so I was pleased to see that. Now, of course, I wandered around to see what was going on, and got into a few die-rolling things. Nobody came out to see me, so I was really, really sad, heartbroken and the like, so I sat in the bar and drank. Well, I only had one drink, but you get the idea. But of course, after my joke in the last video where I said it's really kind of cruel to send Game Methuselah unpainted miniatures that he has to paint with what limited time I have to do so, what do I do? Well, of course, I walk around the convention, I look at all the cool stuff, I go into the dealer room, I buy myself a little stuffed displacer beast that sort of looks like one of my cats, and then I come out into the swap meet area where everybody's kind of bringing their little stuff they don't want anymore to try to sell it, which most of it doesn't really interest me. But of course, some guys got miniatures, and I, of course, go by to take a look at the miniatures, and I realize, wow, you have some really nice old stuff there, things from the 70s and 80s. Very cool. And he was telling me, yeah, I had a lot of gaming. I played a long time, and I decided I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I thought, well, that can't be. I mean, that really can't be. You must be wanting to. And he goes, well, I don't know. Maybe just a transition. Maybe he's just getting out of it for a little while, got to get back into it. He said, but I let all my gamer friends have miniatures they wanted, and then I decided to just sell the rest. And that's what he was doing. And he was, selling some stuff. And of course, I'm looking around and I'm talking to him, and I said, yeah, this is kind of interesting. Got an old box of some really old sort of vintage stuff. And then he had a bunch of little sets painted up. And then he had a bunch of stuff like little sets he'd put together of similar types of miniatures, like Ralpar the Trolls, or, different things that he had. And I thought that was really cool. And he had this box sitting there, and I finally I don't know why, I asked him, I said, so how much for this box of old stuff? And he told me. And I went, well, that's way too cheap. So what do I do? The man who really doesn't want any more miniatures, of course, I bought the box full of semi-painted, painted, unpainted miniatures, vintage, all sort of like 1980 or before. A couple of them in there, I think, are a little more modern than that, but not much. Now, of course, the great rationalization I used was that, you know what, I'll paint up a few that I want, and then I will, sell the others on eBay or give them away or whatever. And I'm sure some of that will happen. But I find it very funny that, of course, the great lure to me is always the same. If there are miniatures there, and if I don't have them, or if I have them and have given them away or whatever, I tend to end up with them. It's kind of like, lead sinkers. You get a lot and you can't give them away. And it just, after a while, it adds to the massive collection, as you guys know I have. Now, it was nice. I liked it. And I was inspired now to maybe paint a lot of the D&D Zero stuff, because I like painting the old stuff. I think as I get a little older, I'm not quite as good of a painter as I used to be. And if I do a mediocre to good job on an old 70s figure, it looks way better than a mediocre or good job on a more modern figure. But still, as you guys know, mostly I speed paint, and that's what I like to do. The challenge I want to make for you is, I think that the hobby needs help. I think it needs a lot of help. And I know you've heard me pontificate about what I think you should do. And I'm sure, circle back to that again. But I think as we're getting our club back together, the HMGS PSW, which is Pacific Southwest version of the Historical Miniature Gamers Society, I realize that this turnout issue is going to be a constant problem in gaming. And I think a lot of the reason is so many people now are into the Zoom or any of the online ways of playing, which I find great. I mean, obviously, if your friends are across the country or outside of the country, like a lot of mine are, it's the only way I'm going to get to play with them is they're going to set up a nice Zoom pack. And even though we'll have the miniatures and the boards and all the things we might have, it's still not quite the same as being there. And then, of course, the other problem I always feel that exists on online role-playing game is when you play, you stop, you say goodbye, and that's the last time you think about that game campaign until the next time you get on the Zoom campaign. There is no post-mortems, there's no talking about the game, how much it meant to you, how much it could be improved, how much they enjoyed it. There's no building of camaraderie, and that always kind of bothers me. Because, back in the 70s when the game started, it was one of the most entertaining and great ways of socially interacting with people that, even if they weren't your friends now, are likely to end up your friends. And most of my friends now have truly come from the gaming industry. Over the many years of playing in multiple games, most of the people that I have become friends with and are still friends to this day are people that got into my gaming groups and continued on. And, we've gone on for decades and decades. And that is where I think you guys need to come in. The way gaming started in the 70s was small groups. I mean, when D&D came out, everyone was so excited to play it. And of course, there were no shops that played. There were no groups that played, no game conventions that ran D&D. None of that stuff existed. So it was up to people like me who would put out a call on Thursday saying, I want to play a game on Friday night. Do anybody want to come? And I'd call 20 people and hopefully 6 or 8 would show up. If 24 showed up, that made it a little more challenging, but you get the idea. The idea is it's really up to the gamers to sort of build back your hobby. If you sit and wait for someone else to do it, it's really not going to happen. I mean, the hobby works great. There's lots of very cool new games coming out all the time, but you will find that most people who are running large events, especially game shops, especially people who are running events and things, are trying to make a living at it. And even though a lot of the game shops have really stepped up and provided tables and everything else, they're normally going to try to sell the new stuff that is going to hopefully generate capital so they can keep their doors open. And it's important to do. But a lot of times the best thing you can do as a gamer is build your own small group, get together and play when you can, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, during the week. If you're a student, well, you play every day. But you then go to the game stores and you start trying to expand your group and grow your group. And as you do that, buy product from the places that are supporting you, because it's really important for this symbiosis between the people who are making gaming possible and the gamers who want to play. I sometimes in Southern California think there's a separation of that it's very risky and dangerous to the hobby for individuals like maybe you and me, because if you don't support them and you really love the games that they're allowing you to play, eventually their doors close. And while I know that firsthand, because of course, having owned 3 hobby shops, I get what it's like to try to keep a retail business afloat. But more importantly for you, it's good to build your games, and it's good to have the postmortems in the games that happen all along. I think I might have mentioned the Guido or Triumph game where I lost one of my main characters in a duel against a Lich, where the Lich came out, he was powerful, he was destroying our party, and at some point, my sort of mid-level wizard, who just happened to have this really powerful staff he had found, was battling with the Lich, and he realized he had to stop his power source, and he raced into where this guy had imprisoned these wizards, and he had a pentagram on the ground that was sucking the power, their magical power out of them, so feeding him so he could throw more and more powerful spells and empower him to do all kinds of horrible things. And, I was able to cover up the pentagram to turn off the power, and the Lich, of course, teleports back into me, and I'm sitting here with 6 hit points left. And I looked at the DM, And I said, I know this staff's pretty powerful. Can I sort of Gandalf-esque kind of final strike it and see and what happens? And, this isn't necessarily in the rules. Why, of course, I love, self-driven DM adventures, because there's so much more to them than can be done in a module because there's no parameters. And he's thinking, he goes, yeah, you sure can. So I, boom, blow up the staff, huge explosion. The Lich is badly damaged. The pentagram is destroyed. It can no longer drain the magic users of their power. The rest of my party flees into the room to do battle with the Lich. And the battle is long and hard, but Liam of Keys, my paladin, is able to slay the Lich at the final blow at the end, and a dramatic ending is had. But the most interesting thing was after that, we went down to the local Denny's, because back in the 70s, that's what you did after a game. You went to the only place that was opened at 2 o'clock in the morning to have dinner, breakfast, something, coffee. And we would talk about the game. We would talk about what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, what was good about the game system, what was great about the game. But this was the most memorable game that we could talk about. And it went on and on. And my friend Don drew art of my, Guidor's triumph as he breaks the staff and blows himself up where they're literally not able to find a thimble full of him. It was a fabulous story. And it got embellished and went on, and it got talked about with other people. And we still talk about it and know about it to this day. I mean, multiple decades later, we're still talking about that event. Kind of why I love running events of my own. Even my playtesting version we played last Friday, where they had to do a mission for a copper dragon. And he gave them this box, and they sort of thought maybe there were dragon eggs in it. And they had to get it back to this magical forge that they were given by the elves and put it into the forge. And don't worry about it. And, they, of course, are going through this and all, but it gets people more interacted with the game when it isn't something that's very fixed, where their imagination can drive the game and make the game way better and make it to the point that they like it more. But that's role-playing, because, as I said, it's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to get new gamers into your hobby, and often they'll play other games that you might learn to love. And it makes it more enjoyable, because now you have a group, you'll always have something to talk about. Now, there's all kinds of things going on everywhere else, but the best way I think you'll ever have role-playing is starting a group. But what I find the desperation is now is that I think there's a lot of people out there who tell me, God, I wish I had a group. I wish I had people. I wish there was something else. I don't live in a large area or whatever. Or my friends are all spread to the multiple ends of the world. I never get a chance to see them. It doesn't mean you can't start something new. My friend Steve, he was starting to play over at a local bookstore that wanted to try to sell their D&D books, and they thought the way to do that was have some guy come in and run a D&D game, and Steve did, and they were right. Lots of people came in, they enjoyed his game, a lot of them are still playing in his game, and a lot of them have continued on, and the bookstore sold a lot of books on D&D and fantasy and all the rest of it. And that's important. I think it's important for you, if you can, or if you can even think about doing it or get people to do it, gather up some people, go to a place and say, hey, look, how about I come down and run a game every other week on a Friday night or something, or Tuesday, or whatever the shop is willing to maybe stay open for, so that you can start a game when people can actually get there and run it yourself. Now, if it's a module game or a campaign setting, that's all great too, but if you can run your own, you have an opportunity to really grow your hobby and find new people, and then try to encompass them into it. Now, I've said all this before, but the thing is, the hobby really, really, really needs you right now. It needs game masters and board game players and miniature painters and miniature battle army gamers to come down and play it. Because as you saw last summer, we had our Bolt Action Summer, and it started out, 4 or 5 people show up, and, that went on for a couple weeks, and suddenly there was 6 people, and then 8 people, then 10, then 12. Before you know it, people were excited to come play a game that, as much as I like it, it's really, really a narrow field game. If you're not into World War II historical, small-scale army battles, it's maybe not your cup of tea. And it's a miniature game, which means you have to kind of like painting miniatures too. So you've got miniature painting and World War II historicals sort of put together in a limited game setting to play at a fast speed pace in a short time. Now, that's really kind of a very small market. Now, there's Flames of War, which is a really great game, 15 millimeter, even a smaller scale than the 28 millimeter we play, but I love the bolt action because it's sort of the same scale as the D&D Fantasy Figs. We're trying to get the gaming back on its feet here in Southern California, and that's really sort of what I'm expressing to you, wherever you're at. You know, however small you think your group is, if it's just you in Alaska, get yourself an old two-player Avalon Hill game or any modern game that can be played with two players. Find somebody else. It's kind of how I started gaming back in the day. You know, I'd take my game to school and I'd walk around with it. And if somebody didn't beat me up and say, hey, what is that? I'd say, oh, it's a board game. Let me explain it. And they say, hey, that looks cool. I had a game friend. And that's how we sort of grew our group in my high school area and started playing games that I had not played before. Obviously, once college got into it, I did a lot more. Once I was at the military shop, I, of course, did substantially more than that. And then, of course, it was always, as you know, D&D, because that changed the whole dynamic of gaming. And I think it made everything for group games and games where people get together really, really possible, because people realize that even though you may just be a small cog in the real world, you can be a superhero in a fantasy hero game, and that's really nice. I think everybody loves to do that, and that's what I always have loved about role-playing games, especially running my own, is you do something dramatic, and at the end of the evening, everyone goes, that was really great. I really had a fun time. And most importantly, it's because you crafted something for just that group. You could play that game all over again. But it's never going to be the same for each group, because each group is going to do something different. They're going to challenge you to expand your concentration and expand your game to be something more dramatic and more exciting for them. And that you want to do. My friend Steve, who sadly is not with me anymore, always said the best thing to do in gaming is don't restrict it and make it like you can't do stuff. Always allow them to do more than they thought they were going to be able to do, because it makes a great game. Now, I don't know whether I might edit this, but I also want to talk to you about role-playing games and things you should collect. This is one of my favorites. West End Games Star Wars. I really like it. It's a very simple, very clean, and really interesting system of how to play the game. It plays quickly. They made a lot of expansions and modules for it, so you can actually play a lot. I loved it because it was Star Wars. And the great thing about the movies is it always felt like daunting to me when I was playing Traveler, which I suppose I should need to do a video about later. Because Traveler, the world was so large, because there was all these planets and ecosystems and everything else, and it was just so hard to understand how the ships could move from place to place. Well, of course, after you saw the Star Wars movie, you realized it was easy. You just get in your ship, you go to hyperdrive, whoosh, and you end up someplace else, and then you go down to the Earth and planet or wherever, and you live whatever the interesting environment is there. And that made it really simple to role play. Character generation is simple, it's clean, it's easy. They make beautiful miniatures, though at this point in life, good luck finding them at a reasonable price. Though I had heard that some people were maybe potentially reprinting them, so there might be more available. I don't know, I hadn't looked into it, but it's a great game. And they made Star Wars Miniatures Battles, which was a large-scale version for this. And of course, there's millions, well, that's not so, scores of spacefaring games that you could utilize to play fleet battles with, Star Destroyers and all that stuff. So you could literally do the old, space battle, land battle, and of course, heroic battle, all at the same time like they did in some of the Star Wars movies, which I also liked. Very thematic, lots of fun. If you love Star Wars, it's almost kind of a must. And I think it's still gettable at a very reasonable price. I was looking on eBay on it, and there's always some people who are trying to make a killing on it, but I found some copies that were very, very inexpensive. Some of them obviously less than what retail was originally for the just basic rules. And there's always lots of modules if you like that sort of thing. But I find loving Star Wars, it's always best just to make up your own planet with your own bad guys and your own heroes. And boom, it's easy. And then they give them some rockety old junky ship that they have to fly through space and hope it doesn't fall apart. And it makes for a fun game system, however you want to play it. Something to look into, something to think about. I think you'd like it. But once again, I need everybody's help out there, at least the few people I reach, to start thinking about the idea of joining a group, starting a group or finding a group and getting into it, and making it your own and making it more enjoyable, because we had a lot of game clubs here that COVID just killed dead as a rock. And it's sad to me because a lot of them were growing and making the kind of thing that I love, where you had great interaction between players and people and opportunities for them to come meet people and then split off into other groups. And that just keeps expanding the hobby. And I'm worried that that has gone away. So it needs to come back now that we're not necessarily as worried about the great plague that has been infesting us here. I think people are worried about other things now, which is also problematic, but it is the way life is. I remember those terrors when I was back playing games in the 70s and 80s. Get out there and run games. Get out there and play games and be part of growing the hobby. Find the conventions that are there and volunteer. Go say, hey, look, next convention, I'm going to run this. So keep out there and keep gaming, because as you guys know, fight me devils, fight, for I hate peace. Everyone be safe and game on.